The morning sun cuts through the windshield of patrol car 247 like a blade, casting harsh shadows across Officer Marcus Bennett's face. 24 years old, 6 months on the force, and already carrying the weight of expectations that feel heavier than his bulletproof vest. The radio crackles with routine calls, domestic disputes, traffic violations, the mundane symphony of urban policing that Marcus thought would feel more heroic by now. Before we get into the part that still hurts to tell, let us know where you're watching from and hit subscribe so you don't miss more deep, raw stories like this. His training officer, Sergeant Rodriguez, had retired 3 weeks ago, leaving Marcus to navigate the streets of East Cleveland alone. The neighborhood sprawls before him like a maze of broken dreams and faded hope, boarded-up storefronts, kids playing in streets where glass crunches underfoot, and the ever-present tension that hangs in the air like humidity. Marcus adjusts his rearview mirror and catches sight of his own eyes. They're harder now than they were 6 months ago, when he first pinned on the badge with trembling fingers and promised his mother he'd make a difference. The academy had filled his head with ideals about justice and community service, but the streets had taught him different lessons. Harsh lessons about us versus them, about survival, about the gray areas that textbooks never mentioned. The call comes in at 11:47 a.m. Suspicious activity reported at Maple and 3rd. Young black male, approximately 15 to 17 years old, possibly involved in drug activity. Marcus feels his pulse quicken as he responds, 247 en route. Maple and 3rd. He knows this corner. It's where the old-timers gather to play chess in the afternoon, where Mrs. Patterson sells her famous sweet potato pies from a card table, where life happens in slow motion despite the chaos surrounding it. But it's also where deals go down in broad daylight, where respect is earned with fear, and where a rookie cop can prove himself or lose himself entirely. As Marcus turns onto Maple Street, his eyes immediately lock onto a young man standing near the bus stop. 17, maybe 18 years old, wearing a Lakers jersey that's seen better days and carrying a worn backpack. The kid, Jerome Williams, though Marcus doesn't know his name yet, is simply waiting for the bus, checking his phone, lost in the mundane task of getting from point A to point B. But something in Marcus's training kicks in, something that whispers about suspicious behavior and probable cause. The way Jerome shifts his weight from one foot to the other. The way he glances around, not with guilt but with the natural awareness that comes from living in a neighborhood where staying alert keeps you alive. To Marcus, these innocent gestures transform into signals of criminal intent. Marcus pulls the patrol car to the curb, engine ticking as it cools. Through the windshield, he watches Jerome, and in that moment, the trajectory of both their lives shifts toward a collision neither of them sees coming. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage of heat and tension. Jerome notices the patrol car but doesn't run, doesn't even flinch. He's been taught by his grandmother, who raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12, to always be respectful to police officers. "Yes, sir, no, sir, keep your hands visible and tell the truth," she drummed into him. "We got nothing to hide, baby. We just trying to live right." Marcus steps out of the car, hand instinctively resting on his radio. The weight of his gun on his hip feels heavier today, more present. He approaches Jerome with the measured gait they taught him at the academy, confident but not aggressive, alert but not paranoid. At least, that's what he tells himself. "Afternoon," Marcus says, his voice carrying the artificial authority of someone still learning how to wield power. "I'm Officer Bennett. Mind if I ask what you're doing here?" Jerome looks up from his phone, genuine confusion flickering across his features. "Just waiting for the bus, sir. Number 42 should be here in about 10 minutes. His voice is polite, respectful, tinged with the slight nervousness that comes naturally when a teenager encounters a police officer, even when they've done nothing wrong. "Where you headed?" Marcus asks, stepping closer. He's looking for tells, for the micro-expressions and body language cues his training officers taught him to identify. But what he's seeing is projection, his own anxiety and need to prove himself reflected back through the lens of suspicion. Downtown, Jerome answers honestly. Got a job interview at the community center. They're hearing tutors for the after-school program. He shifts his backpack to his other shoulder, a movement that Marcus interprets as reaching for something concealed. Hold on there, Marcus says, his voice sharpening. Keep your hands where I can see them. What's in the bag? The question hangs in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Jerome's confusion deepens, but he complies, slowly sliding the backpack off his shoulders and holding it out. Just my resume, sir, and a book. I was reading while I waited. Marcus takes the backpack, feeling the weight of it running his fingers along the zippers. Inside, exactly as Jerome said, there's a neatly typed resume, a dog-eared copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X, and a bottle of water. Nothing suspicious, nothing illegal, nothing that should escalate this encounter beyond a simple conversation. But Marcus is thinking about his probationary period, about the statistics his sergeant reviews every month, about the unspoken pressure to produce results. He's thinking about respect and authority and the thin blue line that separates order from chaos. He's thinking about everything except the 17-year-old kid standing in front of him, whose only crime was waiting for a bus while black. I'm going to need to search you, Marcus says, the words coming out before he's fully processed the decision to say them. Turn around, hands on the car. Jerome's eyes widen. Sir, I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to get to my interview. Turn around, Marcus repeats, his voice harder now, authority masking uncertainty. Hands on the car, now. And Jerome, raised by a grandmother who survived the civil rights era, who taught him that survival sometimes means swallowing your pride, complies. He places his hands on the warm metal of the patrol car, feeling the heat seep through his palms as Marcus begins to pat him down. The search reveals nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no contraband of any kind. Just a kid with a job interview trying to make something of himself in a world that seems determined to see him as a threat rather than a human being. But Marcus is in too deep now to simply apologize and walk away. The radio chatter from other units reminds him that this encounter is being monitored, that questions will be asked if he releases Jerome without justification for the stop. The weight of institutional expectation presses down on him like a physical force. In his patrol car, wedged between the seat and the center console where it's been forgotten for 3 days, is a small plastic baggie containing what looks like cocaine. It's evidence from a previous arrest, signed out for court testimony that was postponed. Standard procedure would be to return it to the evidence locker, but Marcus has been busy, distracted, overwhelmed by the demands of solo patrol. As Jerome stands with his hands against the car, dignity intact but patience wearing thin, Marcus makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He reaches into his patrol car, fingers closing around the baggie, and in one fluid motion, drops it near Jerome's feet. Well, Marcus says, his voice taking on a theatrical quality that sounds foreign even to his own ears. What do we have here? Jerome turns, following Marcus's gaze to the small baggie on the ground. His face shifts through confusion, disbelief, and finally, the terrible understanding of what's happening to him. That's not mine, Jerome says, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. Officer, I swear to you that's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life. But Marcus is already reaching for his handcuffs, already committing to a path that leads away from truth and toward a kind of darkness he doesn't yet understand. Jerome Williams, he says, reading the name from Jerome's student ID, you're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. The handcuffs click shut with a sound like breaking bones, and in that moment, 2 lives change forever. One an innocent young man whose future suddenly hangs in the balance, the other a rookie cop who has just crossed a line from which there may be no return. The holding cell at the 5th Precinct smells like disinfectant and despair, a cocktail of human misery that seems to seep from the concrete walls themselves. Jerome sits on the narrow bench, still wearing his Lakers jersey, still carrying the invisible weight of his grandmother's expectations and his own shattered faith in justice. 3 hours have passed since the arrest. 3 hours of processing, photographing, and the slow, grinding machinery of the criminal justice system turning its gears around an innocent young man. Jerome's phone call to his grandmother had been the hardest conversation of his life, explaining through tears and stammering words that he was in jail for something he didn't do, watching her faith in the system crumble through the phone line. "I raised you right, baby," she had whispered, her voice breaking. "I know you didn't do this. We're going to fight it. We're going to fight it with everything we have." But fighting costs money they don't have, requires lawyers they can't afford, and challenges a system that seems designed to grind people like Jerome into dust. The public defender who briefly met with Jerome had been kind but overwhelmed, carrying a caseload that made individual attention impossible. "Take the plea," he had advised wearily. "Drug court, community service, probation, better than risking trial." "But I didn't do it," Jerome had insisted. "I'm innocent." "Son," the lawyer had replied with the tired patience of someone who'd had this conversation 1,000 times, "innocent people take pleas every day. It's just how the system works." Meanwhile, Marcus sits in the break room of the precinct, staring at the paperwork that will officially destroy Jerome's life. The arrest report lies before him, filled with carefully crafted lies dressed up as police procedure. "Observed subject acting nervously," he had written. "Upon search incident to investigation, discovered suspected controlled substance on subject's person." Each word feels like a nail in a coffin, but Marcus tells himself he's protecting his career, his future, his ability to do good in the world. He tells himself that Jerome will probably get probation, that kids bounce back from these things, that sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. But the lies taste like ash in his mouth. Detective Sarah Morrison, a 20-year veteran with eyes that have seen too much, approaches Marcus's table with a cup of coffee and an expression of concern. She's been watching the young officer since he arrived at the precinct, nodding the nervous energy, the way he keeps checking his phone, the telltale signs of an officer carrying a secret. "How you holding up, rookie?" she asks, settling into the chair across from him. Her voice carries the easy authority of someone who's earned their stripes the hard way, through decades of working the streets and learning that the badge is only as good as the person wearing it. "Fine," Marcus replies too quickly, not meeting her eyes. "Just another day, you know." Morrison nods slowly, studying his face with the practiced eye of an investigator. "Tell me about the Williams arrest. Seemed pretty routine from the report, but something about it's bugging me." Marcus feels his pulse spike but forces his voice to remain steady. "Kid was acting suspicious at a known drug corner. Search revealed narcotics. Pretty straightforward." Morrison sips her coffee, letting the silence stretch. It's an old interrogation technique, letting people fill the quiet with information they didn't intend to share. "Kid claims he was set up, says he was just waiting for a bus." "They all say that," Marcus replies, but his voice cracks slightly on the words. Morrison leans forward, her expression softening. "Marcus, I've been doing this for 2 decades. I've seen good cops make bad decisions when they're under pressure. I've seen careers destroyed by one moment of poor judgment. If there's something you need to tell me about this arrest, now's the time." For a moment, Marcus teeters on the edge of confession. The weight of the lie feels unbearable, pressing down on his chest like a physical force. He thinks about Jerome in that cell, about the job interview the kid will never make it to, about the future that's being stolen one false word at a time. But then he thinks about his own future, The career he's worked so hard for, the respect he's trying to earn, the pension and benefits that represent security in an uncertain world. He thinks about his mother's pride when he graduated from the academy, about the expectations of his community, about the thin blue line that both protects and imprisons those who wear the badge. "There's nothing to tell," he says finally, meeting Morrison's eyes with a steadiness he doesn't feel. "The arrest was clean. The kid had drugs. End of story." Morrison holds his gaze for a long moment, and Marcus has the uncomfortable feeling that she can see straight through to his soul. But finally, she nods and stands up, leaving her business card on the table. "My door's always open, rookie," she says quietly. "Sometimes the hardest thing about wearing a badge is knowing when to take it off before it corrupts everything you thought you stood for." After she leaves, Marcus stares at the business card for a long time, memorizing the phone number he'll never call, thinking about roads not taken and bridges already burned. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Jerome's grandmother, Alina Williams, sits in her kitchen surrounded by photographs of her grandson. Pictures of his high school graduation, his acceptance letter to community college, his volunteer work at the local food bank. Each image tells the story of a young man trying to build something positive from the ashes of early tragedy. Alina is 73 years old, a retired school teacher who spent 40 years in the Cleveland public schools watching children like Jerome navigate a world that seemed determined to crush their dreams. She's seen the system fail countless students, watched as poverty and prejudice and institutional indifference ground down hope like millstones. But she's also seen miracles. She's seen kids rise above their circumstances, overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable, transform pain into purpose and anger into action. Jerome was supposed to be one of those miracles. He was supposed to be proof that love and guidance and unwavering faith could triumph over the statistics and stereotypes. Now, as she sits in her kitchen with the afternoon light streaming through windows that look out on the same streets where Jerome was arrested, Alina feels the familiar weight of systemic injustice settling on her shoulders. But she also feels something else, a quiet, burning determination that speaks to decades of fighting for children who couldn't fight for themselves. She reaches for her phone and begins making calls to the NAACP, to the Urban League, to a nephew who's a paralegal and a niece who works for a civil rights organization, to anyone who will listen to the story of a good kid caught in the gears of a machine designed to destroy young black men. "They think they can just throw away our children," she whispers to herself as she dials. "But they don't know who they're messing with. They don't know that Jerome Williams was raised by Alina Williams, and Alina Williams doesn't raise quitters." The phone rings, and Alina begins the first of many conversations that will, over the coming days, weave a web of support and advocacy around her grandson. She doesn't know it yet, but her calls will eventually reach someone who has the power to change everything. Someone who understands, better than most, what it means to be underestimated. Someone who has spent a lifetime learning that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up when no one expects you to. As the sun sets over Cleveland, casting long shadows across the city, 2 stories continue to unfold. In one, a young man sits in a cell, clinging to his innocence like a life preserver in a storm. In the other, a rookie cop discovers that living with lies is harder than telling them, and that some decisions echo far beyond the moment they're made. Neither of them knows that their stories are about to intersect with a force that will change everything. Marcus Bennett's phone buzzes at 2:17 a.m. His supervisor's voice is tense. "We've got a situation with the Williams case. Come in now, and Marcus, call a union rep." The drive to the precinct feels like a funeral procession. Marcus has lost 15 pounds since Jerome's arrest, unable to eat or sleep without seeing the young man's face. The truth is a wild animal finally breaking free from its cage. Conference room beholds an unexpected scene. Sergeant Davis, Detective Morrison, an FBI agent, and a man in his 60s whose presence fills the room despite his casual clothes. It takes Marcus a moment to recognize him. Denzel Washington. Jerome Williams, Denzel says simply, is my nephew. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus stares, waiting for someone to say this is a joke, but the solemnity in the room tells him it's deadly serious. My sister's boy lost his parents at 12, raised by his grandmother ever since. She called me 3 days ago, crying, saying her grandson was innocent, that he'd been set up. Denzel's voice carries the weight of truth. Alina Williams raised 6 children, taught school for 40 years. When she tells me that boy is innocent, I listen. FBI Special Agent Collins opens her file. The cocaine found at the scene matches evidence from a case you testified in 2 weeks earlier. Evidence that should have been in the property room but somehow ended up at a bus stop on Maple Street. Marcus's world crumbles in slow motion, but it's Denzel's expression that breaks him, not anger but profound disappointment. Why? Denzel asks quietly. This boy never hurt anybody. He was trying to honor his parents' memory and his grandmother's sacrifice. Why would you destroy that? The lies Marcus rehearsed dissolve. I was afraid of failing, of not measuring up. I saw Jerome and he looked nervous and I thought maybe I could make an easy arrest, boost my numbers. So you planted evidence on an innocent child, Agent Collins states. Marcus nods, unable to meet their eyes. When the search came up clean, I panicked. I had evidence from another case in my car. I told myself it was just this once, that he'd probably get probation. Wouldn't hurt him. Denzel's controlled anger breaks through. Do you understand what you've done? He's been in jail for a week, wondering if the world has gone crazy. His grandmother has been crying herself to sleep, spending money she doesn't have on lawyers. Marcus looks up, meeting Denzel's eyes. What he sees there, complete disappointment in humanity itself, makes him want to disappear. I'm sorry, Marcus whispers. Sorry doesn't give Jerome back his week in jail, Denzel replies. Sorry doesn't repair his faith in justice. Sorry doesn't undo the trauma of being treated like a criminal when his only crime was being young and black, and in the wrong place at the wrong time. Agent Collins closes her file. Federal civil rights charges, conspiracy, perjury. You're looking at significant prison time. But Denzel delivers the most devastating blow as he stands to leave. Now you learn what Jerome Williams has known his whole life. That the system isn't always fair, that justice isn't always served, and that sometimes the people sworn to protect and serve are the ones you need protection from. He pauses at the door, looking back one last time. The difference is, Jerome Williams is innocent, and you're going to have to live with what you've done for the rest of your life. The door closes with finality, leaving Marcus alone with the ruins of his career and the beginning of a reckoning that will define the rest of his life. 6 months later, the Hamilton County Courthouse buzzes with an energy that speaks to the significance of the day. Outside, protesters hold signs calling for justice, while reporters jostle for position, their cameras trained on the steps where, in just a few hours, the final chapter of a story that captured national attention will be written. Marcus Bennett sits in the defendant's chair, wearing an orange jumpsuit that's become as familiar as the police uniform he once wore with pride. His lawyer, a public defender who's doing her best with an impossible case, shuffles through papers with the weary efficiency of someone who knows they're fighting a losing battle. Across the courtroom, Jerome Williams sits in the front row with his grandmother Alina, his aunt, and several family members who have driven in from across the country for this moment. He's wearing a navy blue suit that Alina bought for his community college graduation, a ceremony that took place while Marcus was awaiting trial, a milestone that almost didn't happen because of one man's moment of cowardice. Jerome has grown in the months since his arrest, not just physically but emotionally. The scared 17-year-old who stood with his hands against a police car has evolved into a young man who understands, with painful clarity, how the world really works. But there's no bitterness in his eyes, no hatred, just a quiet strength that speaks to his grandmother's influence and his own determination not to let Marcus Bennett's lies define his future. At the prosecutor's table, Assistant District Attorney Williams, no relation to Jerome, despite the shared name, prepares to deliver closing arguments in a case that's become about much more than one corrupt cop. It's about accountability, about the thin line between those who serve and those who destroy, about whether justice can truly be blind when prejudice runs so deep. But the most striking figure in the courtroom sits in the third row, dressed in a simple black suit, his presence both commanding and humble. Denzel Washington has attended every day of the trial, not as a celebrity seeking attention, but as a family member seeking justice for his nephew. His presence has transformed this local corruption case into a national conversation about police accountability and civil rights. Judge Patricia Hernandez, a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years on the bench, calls the court to order. The jury files in 12 citizens who have spent the past week listening to testimony that's painted a picture of institutional failure and individual corruption. Their faces are solemn, reflecting the weight of the decision they're about to render. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Hernandez asks. The foreman, a middle-aged teacher who bears a striking resemblance to Alina Williams, stands up. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of civil rights violation under color of law, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of perjury? Guilty. On the charge of evidence tampering? Guilty. The words echo through the courtroom like gunshots, each one a small victory for truth and accountability. Marcus closes his eyes, feeling the last vestiges of his former life slip away. In the gallery, Alina Williams reaches for her grandson's hand, squeezing it as tears of relief stream down her cheeks. But it's Denzel's reaction that draws the most attention. He doesn't celebrate or smile or show any sign of satisfaction. Instead, he looks at Marcus with something that might be compassion, the recognition that justice, while necessary, rarely brings joy to anyone involved. During the sentencing phase, Jerome takes the stand to deliver a victim impact statement. He walks to the witness stand with the measured gait of someone who's learned that dignity can't be taken away, only surrendered. Your Honor, he begins, his voice clear and strong, 6 months ago, Officer Bennett changed my life in ways I'm still trying to understand. He took away my freedom, my sense of safety, my faith that the people sworn to protect me would actually do so. Marcus can't look at him, can't bear to see the pain he's caused reflected in the eyes of someone who deserved none of it. But he also gave me something, Jerome continues, and this catches Marcus off guard. He showed me how strong I really am, how strong my family is, how many people are willing to stand up for what's right when the system fails. Jerome pauses, looking directly at Marcus for the first time. I forgive you, Officer Bennett, not because what you did was okay, but because carrying hatred would hurt me more than it would hurt you. I have a life to build, dreams to chase, a future to create. I can't do that if I'm anchored to the worst moment of both our lives. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Forgiveness from someone he wronged so deeply feels both undeserved and transformative, a gift he never expected and doesn't know how to accept. When it's time for sentencing, Judge Hernandez doesn't mince words. Officer Bennett, you have violated the most sacred trust that exists between law enforcement and the community. You took an oath to protect and serve, and instead you used your badge and authority to destroy an innocent young man's life for your own selfish purposes. She sentences Marcus to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. It's a harsh sentence that reflects the seriousness of his crimes and sends a message to other officers who might consider similar actions. As the court officers prepare to lead Marcus away, he turns to look at Jerome one last time. Their eyes meet across the courtroom, and in that moment, Marcus sees not the scared teenager he arrested, but a young man who's chosen grace over vengeance, forgiveness over bitterness. "I'm sorry," Marcus mouths silently, and Jerome nods, not in acceptance of the apology, but in acknowledgement of its sincerity. Outside the courthouse, Denzel Washington stands before a crowd of reporters, his words carrying the weight of moral authority that's made him one of America's most respected voices. "Today's verdict doesn't undo the harm that was done," he says, his voice measured and thoughtful. "It doesn't give Jerome back the week he spent in jail, or erase the trauma of being betrayed by someone sworn to protect him. But it does send a message that accountability matters, that truth matters, that every life has value regardless of age or race or economic status." A reporter shouts a question about whether this case represents a larger problem in law enforcement. Denzel pauses, considering his words carefully. "This case represents what happens when good systems are corrupted by individuals who lose sight of their purpose," he says. "But it also represents something else: the power of family, the importance of speaking truth to power, and the reality that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still prevail when people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable." As the crowd disperses, Denzel joins Jerome and Alina for the walk to their car. 3 generations of a family that's been tested by circumstances beyond their control, but emerged stronger and more united than ever. "What's next?" Denzel asks his nephew, genuine curiosity in his voice. "School," Jerome replies with a smile. "I start my social work program next month. Figure maybe I can help other kids who get caught up in the system, make sure they know they're not alone." Alina beams with pride, seeing in her grandson's response the vindication of every sacrifice she's made, every lesson she's taught, every moment of faith she's maintained when faith seemed impossible. As they drive through the streets where Jerome was arrested, he looks out the window at the bus stop where his life changed forever. But instead of anger or fear, he feels something else: gratitude for the journey that's brought him to this moment, for the family that never stopped believing in him, for the opportunity to transform pain into purpose. In his jail cell that night, Marcus Bennett stares at the ceiling and thinks about the choices that brought him here. The easy path of corruption that turned out to be the hardest road imaginable. The lies that seemed like solutions but became prisons of their own. But he also thinks about Jerome's words of forgiveness, about the grace shown by someone who had every right to hate him. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus allows himself to imagine a future beyond punishment. A chance to rebuild, to make amends, to become the person he thought he was when he first pinned on that badge. The road ahead is long and uncertain, filled with the consequences of choices that can never be undone. But perhaps, in time, even the deepest wounds can heal, even the gravest mistakes can become lessons, and even those who fall the furthest can find their way back to the light. Epilogue: The Reckoning. The community center on East 47th Street should have been Jerome's sanctuary. 3 years of building trust, mentoring kids, proving that justice could heal instead of destroy. But as he locked the door after another evening of tutoring, the familiar weight of being watched settled between his shoulder blades. A shadow moved in his peripheral vision, gone when he turned. Jerome's phone buzzed. "Unknown number, you thought it was over." His blood turned to ice. The message deleted itself as he watched. "Mr. Jerome," the voice came from behind him. Marcus Bennett stepped out of the alley, no longer the broken man from the courtroom. Prison had hardened him, turned regret into something sharper. "We need to talk." "You're supposed to be in minimum security," Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Early release, good behavior, amazing what teaching other inmates gets you." Jerome's hand moved toward his phone, but Marcus shook his head. The kids you tutor, sweet little Marcus Jr., in your Tuesday group, he's my nephew. Funny how small the world is. The community center's lights flickered behind them. Jerome realized how isolated they were, how the street had somehow emptied while he wasn't paying attention. 3 years I've been writing you letters, Marcus continued, circling closer. Apologies you never answered, but I realized something in that cell. Some debts can't be paid with words. A police siren wailed in the distance, but it was moving away. Always moving away when Jerome needed it most. What do you want? Jerome kept his voice steady, drawing on every lesson his grandmother Eleanor had taught him about survival. Justice, Marcus said. Real justice. You got yours in that courtroom, got your vindication, your celebrity uncle, your fresh start. But what did I get? 4 walls and the knowledge that you're out here playing hero while I lost everything. Jerome saw it then, the glint of metal in Marcus's hand. Not a gun, something worse, something personal. The thing about teaching, Marcus whispered, is you learn patience. How to wait for the right moment, how to make every lesson count. The community center keys felt suddenly heavy in Jerome's pocket. All those kids who trusted him, who needed him to survive this. His phone buzzed again, Uncle Denzel checking in, having no idea his nephew was staring death in the face on the same streets where his nightmare began. You want to know the difference between us, Jerome? Marcus stepped into the light, and Jerome saw the 3 years of planning in his eyes. You still believe the system can be fixed. I know better now. Behind them a car engine started. No headlights, no escape route. Jerome Williams had survived false arrest, public humiliation, and a broken justice system. But as Marcus Bennett smiled in the growing darkness, Jerome realized his real test was just beginning. Some stories don't end with redemption. Some stories end with a reckoning. The night was young, and Cleveland held its breath.